Good evening. Hey, Stephanie. What's going on? Oh, good. Appreciate you being here tonight for our final installment of our Death and Dying series. I was texting with someone today. Maybe we ought to make this a yearly series that we revisit every year. Maybe we will. We'll see. We want to try to wrap it up tonight. I'm going to share a little bit. Holly's going to finish up what she started 3 weeks ago, I think. But she didn't get a chance to finish one particular segment that I feel like is pretty important for us to hear. So I invited her to come back tonight and finish that up. And, of course, we want to hear from you. It's a very interactive class, but how many people know the rules? What's the rule? Put your hand up. The reason you wouldn't put your hand up is because we're recording this, video recording this series, and we want everybody to hear your question or your comment, okay? Or if you're going to sing a song or whatever it is you're going to do, need a microphone. So if you raise your hand, we'll get a microphone into your hand. And let me remind you for the last time in this series that a microphone is designed to work within 3 inches of your mouth. It does not work when you do this. It doesn't work when you use your hands while you got it. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Gary. So we'll get started here in just a minute. We're going to start with some prayer. Saw Larry Medcalf this morning, day 17 at St. Mary's. And the truth is they don't know anything. After 17 days, they're really just waiting on a bed at UK. UK, never really any good for anything. Sorry. Had to get them Kentucky fans. I figured you'd give me an amen there. No. Man, with that look, I think I'll just move on. But Larry's just a sick guy, and they've run all kinds of tests, and at this point, they don't know anything. They're thinking maybe it's a kidney issue, but they can't say for certain. So remember Larry. And then Jack Wheeler is Kathy Hughes' dad. He's had surgery at King's Daughters, and they've moved him to Cornerstone there at St. Mary's for rehab. So stopped by to see him today, and he's doing a lot better, but he's still got a long way to go. So Larry Medcalf and Jack Wheeler are two that I know of. Prayer requests. Holly. Personal, unspoken. It's about me. I'll take all you got. Bring it. Anybody else? Anybody else over here? Prayer requests? Anybody? Kevin Roach. Connie Roach. Remember those two roaches? I didn't mean it that way. I really didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean it that way. You know I didn't mean it that way. Let me say on the camera, I didn't mean it that way. I just meant the last name. Anybody else? Ray, Fred? That's it? Pray for that empty seat next to her. Let's stand. Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you for allowing us the privilege of being in your house. Thank you, Lord, for allowing us to just be together during this journey as we've discussed this thing called death and dying. I pray tonight that as we finish this series up, that you would just help us, that you would just speak into our lives. Lord, help us to understand and know that our 70, 80, 90 years on this earth is nothing compared to eternity. So we live this life to live the next life. And so I just pray you'll help us with that. I pray, God, for these requests that have been made. We stand on your word and believe in our hearts that you're the God that can do all things. And so we pray that you'll reach into hospital rooms, into homes, even into the church tonight, and just touch people. Physical, spiritual, financial, emotional, we know that you're able. So just supply those needs. We pray for all the classes tonight. We pray for every teacher that they would be anointed to teach a life-changing lesson. God, I pray that in all things, in everything that we do, we can point somebody to Jesus Christ. We love you. We bless you. We praise you. For it is in Christ's name that we pray. Someone say amen. Turn around to 2 or 3 people, 4 or 5 people, shake their hand, hug their neck, bump their knuckles, tweak their cheek. Do something to let them know that you're glad to see them in church. Just within 5 feet of this. See? Okay, I'm gonna give Holly 12 and a half minutes to finish up what she started 3 weeks ago. Holly, again, let me just remind you, Holly works as the admissions coordinator for hospice in Ashland. She's also our co-youth pastor. She's also our children's church director, and most importantly, she's my daughter. And so I think you need to listen very carefully to what she has to say. There's your clicker. Here's your mic.
I don't know if I'll be able to do this in 12 and a half minutes.
Raise your hand if you have a question.
I will try my best to do it in like 15. But really, he said that some people asked for me to come back and finish. The only thing that I didn't really get to cover when I was in here before was I wanted to talk about the actual dying process. What happens to the body when that happens, and what you see, what you hear, what is normal, what is not normal type of thing. So if you have any questions, let me know. And this may seem really weird to some people, but I feel like this is one of the things that, especially as hospice nurses, most important to let families know. We don't stay with families around the clock. So a lot of times those patients' families are going to be there when they take their last breath. We aren't necessarily there. They're going to be there when they're going through these stages. And so obviously as healthy, normal people, when some of these things start to happen, it's good to know that it's normal for that to happen in somebody who is dying. Even though it may not seem normal to us, it's normal for them. And so I feel like this is just a big part of death and dying, is knowing what to expect. Because I feel like that's one of the biggest questions that I get asked is what's it going to be like? What happens now? What's it going to look like? What should we look for? So everybody wants to know what's going to happen. Are they sick? Are they terminal? Yes. They've made the decision to be comfort only. They've made the decision that they're, done with treatments. Okay, so now what's going to happen? So there are two things to a dying body. There is a dying body, and then there's a dying mind. Okay? Two different fields. What happens in the body is one thing, but what happens in the mind, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, is a whole different ballgame. I was talking to a few of you after the last time that I had the lesson, and we were talking about some experiences, and I said, listen, I have had patients who have waited for that one grandson to come there and say goodbye. I've had patients to wait until a birthday or an anniversary was over. I've had patients walk into a family reunion on a weekend and die on that Monday just so they could see all their family. I mean, I firmly believe that the mental, spiritual, emotional side of it is just as strong as the other side of it. They will will themselves to wait until whatever they need to happen. And so first I'm going to talk about the body. I'm going to try and go through this as quick as I can. Normally with the body, it's not very dramatic. And when I say normally, everyone is born different. Everyone dies different. No one person is the same. What I am about to tell you is pretty much textbook things that we look at when it comes to a dying person. You have tragic events that will not look like what I'm getting ready to tell you. But I'm talking about, just what most cases will normally look like when someone is at home or in a hospital or in a hospice or wherever they are and they are dying. Are you going to do my slides for me? I don't think my brain can do both. Are you back there? Awesome. Okay, so coolness. That's one of the things that happen. It's one of the common things that most people know about. Hands, arms, feet, legs, they start to get cool. Sometimes they start to change colors. I remember last time I talked, someone asked, why do they always come in and check the knees? One of the things that most nurses do, especially if someone is near the end of life, they will come in and they will check the pedal pulses, which are the pulses in your feet, and they will look for discoloring, and they will see how far that goes. The reason they do that is because when the body is circulating blood, right now my blood's going everywhere. It's everywhere. If my body was starting to shut down, my body is going to go into this mode where it is trying to go to the most valuable places, and that is my organs. So my extremities at the point of death are not important. They're trying to keep everything else alive. So that's why all the blood goes up and out. So that's why hands get cold, feet get cold, and things start to change colors, is because that blood is not circulating properly like it's supposed to. Completely normal. Sometimes it's not very common, but it does happen. Sometimes their ears will change colors. I've seen people's entire faces change colors. It just kind of depends on the disease process and what all's going on. But most of the time, it's the hands, the feet, the knees. Sometimes it's a grayish purple. Sometimes you will hear it called mottling. That's what it's called when it happens. Really, there's not a lot. There's nothing you really can do to prevent that. We encourage to keep patients warm. We discourage the use of electric blankets. Not okay, just that will cause way too much damage than good. But if they appear to be cold, keep them warm. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to change that action unless their body just miraculously goes the opposite way. Sleeping more. It's one of the first signs that I know as a hospice nurse we hear a lot. You know, my mom's starting to sleep 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. She slept all day. She's not eating as much. She's sleeping all day. So what that is really, if you think about it, when you're sleeping, your body is re-energizing. So it is trying to conserve energy because the body is starting to shut down. Also, they would be in kind of like an unresponsive state. A lot of people will say a coma, but it's more of just an unresponsive state, more of a deep sleep. And it's really just the metabolic changes of the body that are happening. Things are starting to shut down, and that's just something that's going to happen. I'm trying not to get in all my pet peeves. A lot of people will say, especially when it comes to hospice, that they over-medicate patients. Well, you gave them medication, all they did was sleep all the time. Most of the time when we don't give them medication, they're going to sleep all the time anyways. So it's really just, it doesn't matter. Like they're going to sleep. The thing is to take advantages of the time that they are awake. You know, if they're only awake for 15 to 20 minutes, stay close. During that 15 to 20 minutes, make sure you're there. Say things that you want to say. Do things that you want to do. Hold their hand. Let them know you're there. Whatever that is that you need to do it. But also don't think that even though they're in that state of the minimally responsive state, that they can't hear you, because they can. They say that hearing is the last to go. So still talk to them. Don't talk about them like they're not in the room. Don't talk about them like they're already gone. I don't know how many times, a lot of times when they come home from the hospital, where should we put the hospital bed? My advice is always put it where they're going to be around the family, wherever that is. You know, put it in the living room. If they're used to hearing those grandkids running around and having fun, put them in there. Let them hear that. It's okay. It's not bad. Put them in the living room. Put them somewhere where people can come and visit. You don't have to isolate them. You don't have to put them, to a place that's completely, quiet. We'll get into, they could have restlessness and agitation. We'll get in that in a second. But, it's okay to talk to them as though they're hearing every word you're saying. Disorientation. This is another one that happens. We'll get phone calls and they'll be like, my mom doesn't know where she's at, or she thinks that I'm my sister, or she thinks that I'm her mom, or she thinks that I'm her sister, or things like that. A lot of almost kind of Alzheimer's dementia signs will happen. And really all that is without getting too technical, all of the fluids and things that are going on in your body, there's a reason why they draw labs and why things need to be in certain criteria, because when some things go too high, confusion happens. When some things go too low, bad thing, that the body is going through all these changes. So there's going to be confusion. That's completely normal. There's nothing abnormal about that. It's important not to try and correct them, but identify yourself. Tell them that, I'm Holly, I'm your granddaughter. Don't argue with them if they're like, no, you're not. Be like, okay, cool. Like, that's all right. Now's not the time to make sure you're correct in anything. So Incontinence happens. Most of us know what that is. Lose control of their bowel and bladder, and that's just really due to muscle weakness. It just takes a lot of energy to do that, and so they just kind of lose that. Congestion, we talked about this the last time as well. We talked about that death rattle that everybody knows of, the gurgling sounds, and that's normal. Really, like we talked about last time, that just has to do with the fact that they are not processing their secretions like they're supposed to. We sit here, you don't even think about how many times you swallow in the hour that you're sitting in here. Nobody thinks about that. But when they're just laying there and all their energy is going to, the vital organs and everything that's going on in their body, they're just not processing that. And so they're kind of just sitting there. And so when they breathe, it sounds bad. They say that it is a lot more uncomfortable for us to hear than it is for them to experience. A lot of people will want suctioning, and really that just causes a lot of distress. That is a distressful thing for anybody, even a healthy person, to have something shoved down their throat going, it's not. We want to do everything we can to keep them peaceful and comfortable. So we don't encourage that. There are medications that help with that. Sometimes they help, sometimes they don't. One of the best things that helps with it that I have ever used that I feel like is the best way to help is positioning. Turn their head another way, turn their body another way, lift the head of the bed up. It's amazing how just positioning can make a person very, very comfortable. Restlessness. This is a big one. I kind of touched on it the last time because I talked about the different medications that they use during the dying process. Restlessness is something that it's a rarity for me to not see in a dying patient. And normally that is, repetitive motions. A lot of times you'll see them like picking at the air, picking at their bedding. This one lady that I sat with for a long time, she would always sew. Like just was completely imaginary, but that was like her motion that she would do. Sometimes the restlessness is more aggressive, kicking their legs, can't get comfortable in the bed, constantly trying to sit up, things like that. A lot of that is due to the lack of oxygen circulation in their body. Also, the metabolic changes, like I said, all the fluids and the levels and things are not where they're supposed to be. This is one that kind of doubles over to the mental side as well. I talked about this last time as well, this thing called terminal agitation, which is the body is starting to shut down and it's ready to go, and the mind is fighting to stay. And so they're kind of battling each other. We encourage not to restrain patients in any way, shape, or form unless there's in a huge way danger to themselves. It's really easy to keep the atmosphere calm and peaceful if you can. During the restlessness, like I said, there are times when everything's fine, and there are times when you might need to adjust some things to make sure they're comfortable. Music is also a really good thing to use, whether it's singing to them, whether it's just playing music. My grandmother loved listening to soundscapes. We constantly had this nature soundscape, it was playing the entire time with her, and that kept her pretty calm. Anything like that to kind of keep a peaceful atmosphere. If you notice that things are causing them restlessness, for instance, we always like to, for some reason, we like to yell at people, like when especially if they're older, or I don't know. I've just seen so many people laying there and they're dying, and somebody's like, "Aunt Jane, it's me!" And I'm like, oh my gosh. That's just not necessary. Just talk really, just calm, peaceful. Sometimes, and I'm not trying to be insensitive, but almost always there's that one family member that is just kind of over the top. It's okay to put your foot down and be like, if you're going to act like that, if you're going to be that dramatic about it, or if you're that upset, don't say dramatic, that's something I would say. If you're that upset, then maybe you need to go in the living room because when you're in here, she kind of gets a little restless. So let's just try not to let her hear that. There's things you can say in a nice way to encourage them to maybe go to another room and have that, episode. Urine decrease, really, the next two kind of go together, which is the decrease of food and fluid that you're taking in. So obviously your urine output is not going to be a lot. It's going to change colors. The kidneys are going to stop circulating, so they're going to stop working at some point. I think Crystal talked about, the lack of the need for food and fluid when the body's shutting down. It's trying to conserve energy and taking in that food and that liquid and trying to process it is just a lot more harm than it is good for the body. Things that will help with comfort for that is small ice chips, popsicles, mouth swabs, like they have glycerine mouth swabs that will keep the mouth moist, and even using cool cloths on the head and on the neck will help them not feel dry. Because a lot of times they'll be mouth breathing. They'll have their mouth open and kind of their neck extended, and they'll kind of be breathing, and their mouth will get dry and even get, you can just tell it's probably needs cleaned, but you can do mouth care. You can even use a little bit of water, put it in there. I mean, it's fine. But it's good to not. No, it doesn't make sense. You should not make them feel guilty for not eating, force them to eat, tell them that they need to eat. Just don't. Don't tell them what to eat either. I mean, especially if they're dying and they're diabetic and they want a Snickers and they can eat that, give them a Snickers. Like, it's okay. I remember a crisis care case that I worked in Louisa. It was a very young patient. Her daughter was younger than me. She had breast cancer. She was very much actively dying, but she would wake up, I don't know, probably every 4 to 6 hours, and all she would want is lemons. She had sores all over the inside of her mouth because that's all she wanted. But it was the only thing she could taste. And so I was like, eat your lemons, dude. And she did. That's all she wanted was to eat those lemons. And after she died, her daughter, it was a few hours afterward, we were actually waiting on the funeral home, and her daughter just starts laughing. And she was like, how many extra lemons? They had an entire case of lemons in there. And they all had these moments with her where she had woke up in the middle of the night, and they were the ones staying with her, and they sat there and ate lemons. I know that seems silly, but it's a memorable moment for them, and that's all she wanted, and that's fine. So breathing patterns change. This is usually the one thing that I feel like, besides the gurgling, that scares people the most is the breathing, because it can be anywhere from trying not to be too technical, almost like a panting. It can be very shallow. Sometimes it can look like they're not breathing. Sometimes they have apnea, which is they'll take a breath and you're just watching it. I've had patients where I've had to literally put a Kleenex on their chest, and so I can see that their chest is moving, because that's how shallow their breathing was. It was just so shallow I couldn't even tell. So I just put a Kleenex on there, and I could see it moving up and down and up and down. These things are normal. Now, if one of you started doing any of that, I would panic, right? I would be like, this is not okay. But that is normal for them. Especially when it comes to a patient who is actively dying. When I say actively dying, you're looking at the next 24 to 48 hours. Those breathing changes are what you're going to look for to know things are about to happen, because it literally, it's like clockwork. They start to eat less, sleep more. Then they start to sleep all the time. Then it starts with the extremities getting cold. And then they'll start in these breathing patterns, and they'll probably have them for a day or so. And then once that breathing pattern starts to change, you're usually looking at hours. I mean, that's just kind of how it 90% of the time goes. So those breathing patterns are normal. The things you want to look for is, are they struggling? And it's very hard to especially if you don't know what to look for a patient who is not able to verbalize that they're struggling, to know if they're struggling. You may think it's hard, but it's really not that hard. It's very simple. Do they look comfortable? And if you're like, yeah, I mean, they're breathing, but their face is relaxed, not moving, they're not restless, they're just kind of laying there. Okay, then they're probably comfortable. If their brow is furrowed like this, if they're doing this, if they're going like that, if they're breathing very fast, if they're kicking their legs, if they're constantly pulling at stuff, if you see them just you can just tell that they're just fidgety, probably not very comfortable. I mean, it's really that simple. But you also have to keep in mind what's comfortable to you may not be the same thing that's comfortable to them. I've had patients who want to stay in a recliner. I've had patients who want to stay in a bed, not get in a hospital bed, who want to stay on the couch. I remember one particularly, I don't even know how she was comfortable, but she was, because any other position we would put her in, she would find her way back to that position. But she would literally, like, her neck was tight, and she was sitting in a recliner, and just completely, just kind of, her entire body was like just balled up. That's how she was until she passed away. And we would try and lay the recliner back. We would try and lay her head back. We tried to get her in the hospital bed, and she was not comfortable in any of those places until we got her back to that spot. So wherever that place is where they're resting calmly, that's where they need to be. One thing that I didn't put on here before I get to the emotional and mental side of things on my, this says emotional and mental side of things is skin breakdown. How many of you have heard that you should always turn a patient every 2 hours? Most of you have heard that before, right? Not keep them in one place. When it comes to the dying process, skin breakdown is almost inevitable because your intake and your nutrition has a big part of your skin. So when you aren't drinking and when you aren't eating, the reality is that your skin is probably going to start breaking down. A lot of times there's not a lot of prevention. There isn't. And I always tell patients, unless they seem uncomfortable, don't turn them every 2 hours. Because a lot of times, especially, I don't know if there's any medical backstanding to this, but I feel like everything is always heightened during the dying process. And sometimes even touching their skin will cause pain, and you'll hear them cry out, and they're not comfortable. So if they don't need to be moved, just leave them be. Obviously, if they're incontinent, you need to change them. It's good to keep their skin clean. It's good to keep it dry. But you don't have to every 2 hours like clockwork, because a lot of times repositioning them is going to cause them more pain than what they're in where they're at. Okay, so emotional and spiritual. Let me ask, are there any questions about the body things before I move on? Okay. The emotional and spiritual and mental side of things. They may withdraw. Obviously, when they're kind of in that unresponsive and comatose type of state, they're obviously going to be withdrawn because they're not talking. But they will also might be withdrawn before that as well. Sometimes they might just be doing some inner searching. Sometimes they may be preparing themselves to know that they're going to say goodbye. Don't force them to open up and talk about things unless they want to. I shouldn't say that. I'm going to say it anyways. It's very, I feel like, and I'm somebody who's probably going to get mad at me, it's inevitable, but if any of you are ever in a situation where you feel like keeping a diagnosis from your loved one is the best option, let me tell you that it is not. You are not doing them any fairness of them having their closure, because they may need to say things, they may need to make things right with people, and you're stealing that from them by not being honest with them. It happens a lot. I never knew that it happened as much as it did until I started working with the hospice. I walk into a place and they're like, Mommy doesn't know she's got cancer. And I'm like hospice. Like, how am I supposed to explain this? Like, I have to wear this name tag, and if she asks me, I have to tell her. Like, why doesn't she know she has cancer? Well, she just knows that she's sick. Well, maybe she's got a brother she needs to make things right with. Maybe her will and stuff is not where it needs to be. Mommy needs to know that she's sick. So that's my just personal advertisement for being honest with your family. Okay, so vision-like experiences. This happens a lot. They're going to be talking to and seeing people that are already dead. It's almost like a telltale, like they're talking to their mom or their sister or a kid maybe that's passed away, or they're asking you, sometimes it's a little creepy, they're asking you what those little children are doing in the corner, and you turn around and you're like, there's no one there. That happens a lot, and honestly, I don't really know what the reason could be. It could be the metabolic changes that are going on. It could be that they're just preparing their spirit. They're kind of disconnecting from here and trying to connect with there. But regardless of the reason, it's important to not try and tell them that they're seeing things, or not try and say, Aunt Judy's already dead, or, just... It's okay to kind of go along with it. I'm not saying lie to them, but it's okay to just be like, oh, you're talking to Mommy, what's she saying, or whatever they're doing. Don't belittle them or try and argue with them and be like, listen, Mommy's been dead for 20 years. Like, there's just no reason at that point in time to just don't. Restlessness, which we already talked about. Decreased socialization. This is one that I feel like a lot of families have difficulty with, especially in this area, which I've talked about. I know Crystal talked about. It's all about being together and eating and socializing, and that's just what we do around here. But a lot of times, patients might want to be alone. Patients might want to be with just one person. So don't be offended if they want, if they ask for a specific person. Maybe there's something about that specific person that they need to either talk about, or they just want that person to be with. It could very well be that their closure with you is good. Like me and Nicole, I don't got nothing left to say to her. So, but I need to talk to Natalie. We got a lot to talk about, Natalie. But no, I said we're good. That's because we have closure. That's a good thing. But that very well could be it. They could have closure with you, but they want to talk to somebody else. So don't ever be offended by that, and be respectful of those situations. I remember with my grandmother, I wish I would have known now as much as I know. I wish I would have known then as much as I know now. I probably would have done things a lot differently, but we sat with her around the clock. Somebody was with her around the clock. And when I finally went, I was down there a lot, but I finally went down there during this process, and I took the night shift. And it was literally, I had gotten up to go wake my mom up because she was doing the day shift, and I was getting ready to go get in the shower. And it was within that transition that she passed away. And I am not, at this point, I'm not surprised that she did not want to do that in front of one of us. I know that seems weird to some people, but it doesn't surprise me at all. Because honestly, it probably would have been a lot harder for one of us to have seen that, but neither of us did. And so that's a good thing. And a lot of people are like that. Some people, it's so weird. It's because it's all over the place sometimes. Some people don't want to be alone. They want to be surrounded. And some people just don't. I feel like with my Mama Jo, that she did not want to show us that she was giving up. And even though she was way beyond treatment and was way beyond, anything, that was still that final thing that she was holding on to. And, some people are like that. They don't want to do that. They don't want to have that memory. It's important to, and this isn't in my notes, and I'm almost done, I promise. It's important to talk, which I'm sure you guys talked about this, but it's important to talk about what they want. What do your parents want? What does your spouse want? I told Ryan, I've been on my parents forever about a living will and getting a power of attorney in place and all that stuff. I see so many families completely torn apart when it comes to making these type of decisions. And they can be strong families and close families. It doesn't mean that you started, at odds, but you end at odds very quickly. Because if my dad doesn't tell us what he wants, Josh is going to think he wants one thing, and I'm going to think he wants something else. So, like even with Ryan, I told Ryan, me and him are the same way. We don't want nothing. Don't bring us back. No machines, no nothing. Just let us go. And I was like, you say that. I was like, but if you get in a car wreck and I'm standing in the emergency room with Tracy Schneider, and she's going to come toe-to-toe with me and say, I want my boy to live, and I'm saying, he said he didn't want anything done, we need it on paper. I need to know what you want. And you may think that may be ludicrous, that Tracy would never do that, but you just never know. That's her son, right? But if Ryan would just let us know, I told him, I said, I don't even care if it's legal. Just write it down. I have my will handwritten in my Wicked, the Broadway play. I have the Wicked book upstairs. Everybody in my family knows where it's at. I have who I want my dogs to go to, what I want done with my clothes. I've already given my Wizard of Oz collection away, so that doesn't count anymore. I'll need to update it. But I have everything on. I will have how I want my funeral done, what songs I want played. Because, why not? I don't want my dad and Ryan sitting at the end of a bed trying to decide whether to keep me on life support or not. I don't want that. I want them both. I don't want to put that on my family. I want them both to just be like, this is what she wanted, this is what we're doing. So I urge you, and I don't care if you are 20, and I don't care if you are 100. I urge you to have this talk with that person in your family who you know is going to be taking care of these things, because it is important. It is important, you two. Yes, both of you. A big thing with us for a really long time was where are they going to be buried at? Do they stay here? Like, will me and Josh stay here after they pass? Or is it back to Indiana where the rest of their family is? That's a big question. They still have yet to answer it. So, oh, she wants a microphone.
Well, I understood that we didn't have to answer it because you said you were having us both cremated and stuck on the shelf.
Oh, that's true.
So I think you've already made the decision.
It's just cheaper.
And we don't have to make a decision about what we want because you've already made that decision.
But Josh is technically...
You said, Josh, here's the gun, just take him out back.
Oh, my gosh, I did not. Josh will technically be the next of kin. If you know my brother at all, he is not the best at making any type of decisions. Like, he didn't even get a birthday dinner this year because he would not decide where he wanted to eat, so we just didn't have one. So that's what'll happen. But I already told my family, like, if any of you leave it up to me, we're doing comfort care all the way. That's just how it goes.
Well, he'll have to decide what he wants.
He'll still have to decide what he wants for you to get it. Okay, so let me bring it back. I'm almost done. Unusual communication. This is a thing that I see a lot in men because I don't know why. I just do. They'll be a little bit different when they're going through this process. Maybe your dad's never told you he loved you. Maybe he's always been kind of a stern, mean man. Maybe you've never seen him cry. When that process starts to happen, men start to change. Everybody does, but I see it a lot in men. And don't make them feel guilty. Don't make them feel bad. Don't say, are you okay? I mean, obviously, they're trying to get through this, so let them get through it. saying goodbye, obviously a difficult thing to do. Sometimes it can be done by just telling them that you love them, encouraging them that you're going to be okay. That's a big thing. You know, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. I felt like that was a big thing with Tracy's mom, because she had, helped raise Ryan, and they had always been them three, Tracy and Ryan and the grandmother, and I felt like that was a big thing for her, was Tracy letting her know that she was going to be okay. Me and Ryan had stepped outside, and Ryan had walked back inside, and Tracy literally had just said that to her. It's okay. I'm going to be okay. And I mean, it was within minutes that she passed. So it's okay to tell them that, and it's okay if it's not necessarily going to be true in the first few months. Does that make sense? But they need to know that you're going to be okay. They need to know that what they're going through and what they're doing is not wrong. And I feel like that's out of everything that goes on during the dying process, I feel like that mental and emotional and spiritual side of it is so strong. I mean, it is so strong. I've had, we don't call them chaplains anymore. We call them spiritual counselors. But I mean, I have sat with our spiritual counselor and patients, and especially a lot of, and I don't mean to step on any toes, but a lot of veterans, they feel like, I have seen them feel like they need to know that they're going to be okay when they die. You know, that they're not going to be held responsible for things that happened in the war or things that they may have done, and they want that peace. And I remember one gentleman specifically. He was a World War II veteran. He was just awesome. That he met his wife in France, and like it was just this perfect little story. And that was his big thing. He's like, I need to know that I'm going to be okay. And he was a Christian, and they had prayed the sinner's prayer with him and all of that stuff. But he just still had this unsettling. And Jim went and talked to him, and he was better. And had a lot of peace out of that conversation. And it's good for them to have that closure and to get things off their chest. And sometimes it's not going to be you that they're going to do that with. So it's good to have a pastor around. You can call places and have them send people. Even if you're not a hospice patient, we would send a spiritual counselor out, if someone would need to have that prayer. Hospitals have chaplains that can come and talk with you, and even, what's it called? Final rites, is that what it's called? Last rites, that. I had a big, long conversation with my friend Ronnie today about Catholics. She's Catholic, but I don't understand half of it. Anyways, so it's just important that you know what they want, that you honor what they want, and that you don't try and push your agenda or your will upon what they're wanting to do. Because as difficult as it may sound, it's not about us. We're left, we hurt, we have to go through a lot, but you need to know and you need to have peace that you did everything for that family member and that loved one that you possibly could to give them a peaceful farewell. Any questions?
Questions, comments?
You
can stick a mic in her.
No, it's too far.
It's not really a question, it's a comment. At the hospital, at the VA, we have a program there called No One Dies Alone. And I'm part of that program. And what happens is when we have patients that come out there and they are like in palliative care and this, that, and other, we go sit with them. So a lot of times, a lot of the veterans that's out there, they don't have families. And so people will bring them out there and just leave them to die alone. And so there's a lot of the employees out there that we go and we sit with them, and they like music. Like the last one I sat with, we played the Gaithers for him because he liked the Gaithers. So, but anyways, I didn't know if you guys knew about that or not, that we had that.
Any other questions? You know Christina Davis? She's my buddy. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Yeah. It's 7:45, and I had a half-hour stuff myself. Just get out. Go. I appreciate Holly and what she does. Let me just make some comments, and would love to hear from you. You know, our thesis, what we started with, was this: to look at death and dying from the perspective of the church. Is there a Christian way to confront dying and find real help in the face of the inevitability of dying? Let me read it to you one more time. Our purpose the last 12 weeks, to look at death and dying from a perspective of the church. Is there a Christian way to confront dying and find real help in the face of the inevitability of dying? I would love to hear from you whether you feel like we accomplished that. There's a collective yes. That was weak, but yeah, it was a golf clap, wasn't it? You know, and we've talked about a lot of things. Let me just run through it real quick, and then I'm going to do some Q&A. Crystal's here. She can take all of the hard questions. I'll take the softballs. We talked about the history of death and dying in the church. We talked about what does the Bible say about death and dying. Remember, the question was, why do we die? Somebody tell me. Sin entered the world, and the Bible says it's appointed that a man wants to die, that we're going to die. What happens when we die? Absent from the body, present with the Lord. All right, so we talked about that. And then we talked, week 3, I talked about what do you say to someone who is dying? And Holly really talked about all that, but our goal should be to address any concerns that person has and address them quickly in any way that we can. Don't avoid a conversation. Don't avoid talking to that person. You need to immediately address what's going on. And then week 4, I talked about can we let go? Can we let go? And that was before I turned it over to Crystal that next week. And the purpose of that lesson was there comes a point where we turn from cure to comfort. We turn, and can we let go? Can we allow ourselves to be there? The problem is, and those of you that were here for the Francis Chan video, again, what an incredible illustration of understanding that our little 70 years is nothing compared to eternity. But yet we get so caught up right there. And I love the way he says, we work really hard these first 60 years so that we can enjoy these last few, not even thinking about, eternity to come. And so then Crystal took over. She talked about options and consequences, treatments to consider, the journey to letting be, and then the cure sometimes, comfort always. Holly spoke. Rick Slack and Beth Wallace came over and spoke. Tracy Schneider shared with us about her experiences. And then that brings us to tonight. And there's one thing that I did not cover in the last 12 weeks, and somebody asked me about it today. I have never liked, and I don't know if Crystal may, we've pretty much agreed on everything, but I don't know if she'll agree with me here or not. I don't like cookie cutter remedies to anything. I don't think there's one size fits all. I think everybody processes this whole issue differently. There are some commonalities in there that we've talked about, but there is a thing called the 5 stages of grief. And it is legit, and I have used it with people that are going through, but I just don't think this fits everybody. That's why I didn't really talk about it, because everybody's like, well, if I didn't get to stage 3, then there's something wrong with me, and I don't want anybody to feel that way. I did make some copies of it. You're free to get it. Here's what they are, okay, if you've never heard this before. The 5 stages of grief: denial. They're not sick. They didn't die. They don't have cancer. You just deny it. You just act like it's not real. Then you can enter into this stage called anger. They are sick, they did die, and I'm mad about it, right? It makes me angry. Angry for a lot of reasons. We get angry at God. We get angry because we missed that person. We get angry because maybe they were a smoker and they died of lung cancer, and then we get angry about that, right? Stage 3 is bargaining. If I could just do anything to take this disease from you, if I could just do anything to have them back. and we enter into this stage where we do the bargaining. And then stage 4 is depression. You just enter into that season where it sucks the life out of you. But then stage 5 is acceptance. This is how we get to heaven. Everybody wants to go to heaven. Nobody wants to die to get there. I accept the fact that this has happened now, and that person is in a better place. So there is, I mean, that is legit. And again, I don't know how you feel about it, Crystal. It's a legitimate process. The problem that I have with this, number one, cookie cutter. I just don't think one size fits all. Number two, people will try to put a time frame on each stage. Like within 12 months, you should be all 5 stages. Some people get through it in 5 days. Seriously. And some people never get through it. And so that's why I didn't really talk about it. If you would like to have it, it really gives a description of all those stages. Crystal, what your thoughts about the 5 stages of
What are you doing? Don't take my job.
She's union. Well, I mean, I think most people do grieve that way, but actually, you know, the lady who invented those stages, who was dying herself when she wrote that, she pretty much says, you know, there's no time frame, there's no order in which those things happen, and just because you go through it once doesn't mean you're done with that phase.
Right.
You can revisit that phase.
Yeah.
Until you finally get to that acceptance phase. So, I mean, I think that's true for most people, but you're right. Everyone does it differently,
Yeah.
and what yours looks like is not going to be what mine looks like.
I mean, I remember doing a funeral for a friend of mine. It was his brother's son. He had a son that died at like 30, and then just like a year later, a second son died. And when I went to do the second son's funeral, his dad says to me, well, my pastor told me that I should be over the first death by now. Yeah. I'm like, you can't. How do you tell anybody that? I mean, I don't think you can tell anybody that. Can we encourage people after a period of time to, try to start moving forward, or maybe start coming back to church? I mean, those types of things. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think there's a time frame or cookie cutter. Like, here it is. It happened, and so count day number 12. This is where you should be.
Yeah. But I think, I can't remember the question you said at the very beginning when you were talking just now.
You're asking me to remember something?
Well, but
let's go to the tape.
As Christians, how do we look at death and dying? I think the recurrent theme of all of this is to be supportive.
Correct.
And that is what you should be in everything, not just dying. But your only job when you're dealing with someone who is dying is to support that person, period.
Yeah.
Not to try to make them die the way in which you want them to die, or grieve the way the way that you think that they should grieve, but to support that person. Mm-hmm. And that's your job as a Christian also, is to support people.
And I think, I'll talk till you get there. I think the church in general has just done a terrible job of helping people understand that. Again, I think we have farmed it out. Once somebody is sick, once somebody receives a terminal diagnosis, we say, okay, medical field, do your thing. And Crystal says the medical field's terrible. But the church, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, the church was where you went when that time came. And the church would walk through that with you and help you with that, but not anymore. I mean, it's like, no, we need to see doctor. And doctors are great. I'm not here to down doctors, but I think the church needs to be involved in that. It needs to walk with people. And people need to feel comfortable coming to the church in those situations. Natalie.
I just want to say that I think it is that to support, but also to talk about it, which
Absolutely.
I think you just hit on. It's not this mystery. It's not this fear. It's something that we all have to do, and to talk about it. And we've been talking about it.
Yeah, and we're done with it. And again, I'll steal it from Crystal. She said it. What's the death rate in America, around really in the world? What's the death rate? 100%. I mean, we're all. That's what's going to happen. We're the way we get out of this life is through this portal called death, and we go from this life to the next. I pray that we are all ready to do that in eternity with Christ. unfortunately, some people go through that portal and enter into a world that is Christless. And I feel like that part of that comfort and part of that walking through it with them is addressing the spiritual side of things. And again, I know I said it a couple weeks ago. I mean, that conversation I had with the lady in the ICU at Cabell just a couple weeks ago, and she's not ready to go, and she's stage 4 cancer. She's going to die. And I'm like, we can mark that off the list. We can take care of it right now. We can just pray and ask God to forgive us. And she's like, I don't think I'm ready for that. When then? You know, when are you going to be ready? And so I think that is one of the most important things we can do is obviously talk about that spiritual side of things and be able to help them with that as well. Ray.
I just wanted to touch on the 5 stages of grief.
Okay.
Just wanted to make a comment that you're right. Not everybody
of course.
goes through those cookie cutter feelings, but I can say from experience that I have touched on every one of those, and I'm coming up on 4 years, and I'm still going through them. When I think I'm done, I'll go back to the first one, or I'll go back to the 4th one. The cycle continues for me constantly.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm not denying. I'm not in step 1 of the 5 stages of grief about the 5 stages of grief. I know they are legit, right? Sometimes I just avoid those cookie cutter things just because, you know, I just feel like everybody is going to do it differently. But it's legit. I'm not saying it's not. Sander.
I just wished I would have had this in 1989 when my mom passed away because I've learned a lot. And I think we all have been very well enlightened in the spiritual and the body and the soul and the whole world.
Thank you.
I think it's been very good.
Thank you. I hope it has been. Kathy Stapleton.
I just had a real quick thing. I'm going through this with my friend right now. Her husband is dying. And I told her about this series, and she can't leave him, and she wanted to know if there's any way she can watch it.
Yes, our YouTube channel. If you're not already doing that, I mean, you can go to the website. I think it's there as well. But Tri-State Worship Center, hyphenated, Tri-State Worship Center, and YouTube, and all of this series is on there, except for tonight will be there probably by Friday. But yeah, all previous 11 weeks are already on there. Tyler and Terry Brammer have been great about getting that ready and helping us. Some of you probably know by now, I was in Indiana on Monday. That's where my mom still lives. My mom is, she's getting at that point where we've had to have these conversations. And the class has really helped me be able to talk to her about some things. She needs to be in assisted living. I went up Monday to help with the power of attorney paperwork, making my brother her power of attorney. And, even going through this class and even knowing all the things I know, and my mom is a strong Christian woman. I'm telling you, she is she would make us get up every morning at 6 o'clock. She would feed us breakfast. And then in the living room, every day of the week, somebody had to read a chapter out of the Bible. Now, that meant whoever's turn it was, they were reading while everybody else was sleeping, but yet she made us do it, and she's strong. But even sitting there and me saying, Mom, you do understand why we're doing this. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to say to your mom, but she's just at that point where, we need to get those things in order. And like Sandra said, I'm glad that we've had this class so that I can now talk to her about and do it, and not do it in a harsh, ugly way, and not wait for the emotion of the moment, right? When it gets to the point where maybe she passes and there's this emotion that's involved now that we can't make clear decisions. We can't make clear-headed decisions while there's the heat of this emotion. And, with my dad, when he passed away, be 6 years ago, coming up in July, we thought we had things taken care of with him as far as what we knew he wanted at end of life. And there was one little hiccup, and that was my dad had a defibrillator, and there wasn't anything written down about what to do about it. And I don't understand but I just know this: every time his heart would stop, that thing would kick it back in. And he wasn't there. He was gone. But they couldn't pronounce him dead because every time his heart would stop, the defibrillator, kick it back in. So finally my mom, did tell him, said, well, you need to go ahead and just turn that off or whatever you got to do. And of course, she had to leave the room, and he passed. But, having those conversations, talking about if there's any of that paperwork that you didn't get, as far as I know, Crystal can still have access to a lot of that paperwork, is filling out wills and medical power of attorney, all those things you need to do. You just need to take care of them, because the dying process, I don't want to call it not enjoyable. It's never enjoyable. But the dying process should be a whole lot more palatable than it is now. I mean, there's so many times we just enter to such grief and such anguish because we haven't talked about it, we haven't taken care of anything, we haven't written anything down, and all of a sudden, we're hit in the face with it. And that really, that's a hard way to go about it. So I appreciate the kind words, and maybe we will revisit it again in about a year and do a refresher course on it. Anybody, anything? Now's your chance. If not, we're gonna close with prayer. Got Karen Partridge in a pear tree.
I just, excuse me. I just have one maybe ridiculous question that kind of goes back to the beginning when you were talking about Bible's take on things. Does the Bible say anything about children that die before, or babies that die? Do they grow up in heaven?
That's a great question, and I wish I had a great answer, but I don't. I do know in King David's case, the child that was born that died, he said that the child couldn't come to me, but I can go to where he's at. But that was I don't remember. I think it was week 1 or 2 that somebody asked the question. Are we going to look like this when we get to heaven, or I don't know. I know this body has to change somehow from corruptible to incorruptible, from mortal to immortal, right? So somehow it's got to change. The question about, can my loved ones see me? The ones that I know my mom's looking down and smiling. I don't know the answer to that question. My personal answer would probably be no, but only God knows the answer to that question. And if they can, they're not looking with these eyes. Because if they were looking with these eyes, they'd be sad, wouldn't they? They'd be sad, and there's no sadness, there's no tears. So if they can see us, they don't see us the way we see each other. So I think, answer the question of what did Methuselah look like at 500 before he turned 969, right? He died at 969. What did he look? Did he look like 50 when he was 500? I wish I knew. Like, he lived to be 969. Can you imagine what he looked like at 950? What did Methuselah look like at 950 years old? Good answer. Survey says, ding, number 1. Anybody else? I appreciate your patience during these last 12 weeks. We'll start next week talking about building our spiritual house. We're going to talk about building a spiritual house because I think that will help us live a life that if we live good and live well, we can die well. And so I kind of want to tie that together to segue it in there. Let's stand. Appreciate everybody being here. Don't forget tomorrow night, Royal Rangers and the ladies' Bible study. Tracy does the Bible study at 6. Royal Rangers. If you have kindergarten through 8th grade young man, we have a program here that's really good for them. They're working on pine box cars. Look at that. He's got one in his hand. We're teaming up with Christ Temple the 12th, April the 12th. I'm going to have a derby, and hopefully we beat them just like really bad. Okay. I'm kidding. Don't tell Chuck I said that. Did I say something? Was it something I said? Did she pinch you? Did you want to build a car? I knew it. There's a kid in there somewhere. And then Sunday morning, be Sunday school at 9:30. Will be sermon 2 of the series we started this past Sunday, Secret of the Stairs, and it will be the upward climb. Last week was the upward call, which, how many saw my string break on my kite? Anybody see that? It's like, man, we worked so hard on that. But anyway, don't forget that. And then Sunday night, we're going to continue our journey through Philippians. happiness beyond our happenings. And I think we're going to be at the end of chapter 2 of Philippians Sunday night. So if you want to read up on that, that'd be great. Lord, thank you. Just thank you for the last 12 weeks that we've spent together, taking this journey of discussing and speaking of death and dying. Thank you for Crystal Vance and her heart and everything, the wisdom, the knowledge, all those are great, but just the heart that she spoke to us through. Thank you for Holly and Tracy. Thank you for Rick Slack and Beth Wallace and their participation. God, I just pray that the information and the inspiration would just challenge us, convict us to be proactive, to do the things that we need to do to help in our families or with friends who are going through this process. I pray that something that was said, a nugget that was given, will just help someone as we go through this journey called life. God, I pray that when we leave this place, you'll keep us safe. We love you, we bless you, and we praise you, for it is in Christ's name that we pray. Someone say amen. Amen. Shake someone's hand, hug someone's neck, bump someone's knuckles. Tell them you're glad to see them in church. We'll see you the next time.